DigitalJamSessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. We're coming at you live from ELAM in East London, and we have with us the lovely Mark from Tameka and
Hello
also
there.
Curtis from ELAM, we've decided you are the head of the games
course leader.
course leader. There you go, we've decided. So gentlemen, would you care to explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
So yeah, me first. We have tried to kind of innovate the education industry in the way that we're trying to push forward a little bit more of an industry focused concept for teaching games. Games has only been around at this kind of A-level standard for probably about 3 or 4 years. Previously, we've had to do sort of like graphic design and things like that, and that sort of led students into games. But right now, we're really, really closely working with Machinima. We're really closely working with Creative Assembly and all these sort of studios, and trying to kind of get feedback onto how we best structure and best prepare our students for the working world of games industry, which is quite a big one.
Shall we explain what the acronym ELAM actually stands for
So
the
ELAM,
listeners who haven't heard of ELAM before?
Yeah, so ELAM, we're in East London. So that's East London College of Arts and Music. So arts part at the moment stands for kind of us doing our games.
So you're going to get a G in there somewhere at some point.
Yeah, good. Pushing for. Yeah. So that's us, and we're nice and local to lots of like little game studios like Chucklefish who came in around today as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you're up to with Tameka?
Yeah, so Tameka is primarily a games company, a VR games company. Our team is made up from a collection of kind of military VR veterans that have been working in VR for 15, 20 years and some AAA game developers. So we went out 4 years ago, saw Palmer Luckey with his Kickstarter project and said, hey, at last, VR is going to hit consumers and we want to be part of that. So we created a prototype back then without a name, I think, at that point, launched on Oculus Share. We got a lot of attention because we broke a lot of those early rules, that early guidance around VR, which was, to not chuck people around at high speed, to not change direction, to not shoot them. And of course, we went against all of that and created a game called Radial G, which shoves you around tracks at 600 miles an hour whilst avoiding gates and missiles from your competitors. So
If we had to explain in kind of traditional game manner what a Radical G is, can we compare it to kind of Wipeout? Or is that bad?
It's very often compared to Wipeout. It's very often compared to F-Zero.
Wipeout in VR. I like it. That's good.
That's. I mean, we're all gamers, of course, and that was a game that we grew up with and loved. And so when we came to decide in what we're going to do in VR, it was the natural course. And our lead designer at the time is from a racing game background. In fact, he was one of the lead designers on Extreme G, which might give you some clue as to why it's now Radial G.
Okay.
So we kind of took if you remember F-Zero, you remember those tubular tracks, and we basically expanded upon that. And we did that for a reason, because if you had a tubular track in space, then you don't have an horizon. And removing horizons in VR is really important because the body then...
Especially important if you're making any space VR programs. Reminder.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're here today because you have, I'm going to call it an eSports event, because that's really what it is that's going on in the hall down the corridor, where there's going to be a bunch of different people who are going to sling a headset on their head and play a little bit of Radical G, whilst some other people sit there and cheer and watch them on a big screen.
Hopefully, yeah. It's going to be terrible if everyone's just silent, so we're kind of hoping there's lots of hoops and hollering.
But the reason I bring this up is because one of the interesting areas in terms of the emerging trends for where we think gaming in VR is going to kind of head, because VR, there are many different aspects of VR, but specifically gaming VR, is looking at this eSports and this location-based entertainment focus. Because I think in reality, no pun intended, A lot of people talk about consumer VR and they tend to forget that there aren't enough headsets in the world to really make it a viable market. And that in fact, any VR game studio who is, at least vaguely experienced is going to know they're not going to make money on a VR game at this moment in time. They're going to need to be taking work for hire jobs or non-entertainment based jobs in order to kind of get the money flowing through the studio. And so I am kind of curious about where we think things are headed from a kind of a location-based entertainment perspective or LBE perspective, because we see things like The Void, we see things like zero latency, we see all these kind of shopping mall destination events that are starting to kind of sprout up. And we're seeing a lot more of this, certainly in New York and Los Angeles, where we're seeing these VR arcades kind of popping up. But there are, I think, still quite a lot of myths that perpetuate around what a VR arcade is versus what location-based entertainment is. So I'm going to start with you, Mark.
Yeah, you're going to ask me to explain it too. And in truth, I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Okay.
The VR arcade phenomenon is we get contacted literally every week, multiple times every week, asking for us to support their arcade. And, that can be, a couple of people who have bought a, small location and, a little bit like the old internet cafe, right through to, we're talking to people that have, locations the size of hangars and they're looking to create, full body simulators and simulator seats and the dome auditoriums, really go to town. So, and we see every type of inquiry.
So let's explore that in a little bit more depth, because I think this is quite interesting. And in as much as when you talk about VR, there is a spectrum of VR, and most people, they understand VR to be the same thing, irrespective of whether you're talking about 360 film or you're talking about mobile, HMD, or you're talking about tethered. Well, this is what I mean. It's, you're talking about this spectrum of people's understanding of what VR actually is. And even the people who should know better, you say VR and what they really mean is a 360 video. And so that there is that kind of spectrum in terms of actually what the experience of VR means. I think in the same way, when it comes to arcade and location-based, there is a spectrum there that needs to be defined. It needs to be kind of classified so that people understand actually there is quite a significant difference in terms of A, the type of consumer that is going to these locations, and B, what the actual location needs in order to operate. So for example, I'm aware of a location in New York that is essentially, it's like 120 headsets, but those headsets really are mobile HMDs. They're not, there might be about 5 tethered out of the 120, the rest are all kind of mobile. So it's really about experiencing 360 videos and giving the consuming public the chance to be able to experience, a mobile headset and a 360 video rather than giving them a chance to experience a full tethered headset. It's a very different thing. So I am also aware, though, that you then have on the other end of that spectrum things like The Void, for example, which is opened here in London, but there's also obviously the Los Angeles and the New York locations. But with that, you're talking about a whole other category of experience. You're talking about a laptop in a backpack on your back, you're talking about a tethered headset on your head, and you're talking about some kind of prop in your hands like a gun or whatever the thing is. And more than that, you're talking about that kind of warehouse scale cooperative play, multiple players, cooperative play, being able to see other people in the environment, but also having that sense of unified purpose, unified mission within the experience. So it's not this insular experience of, I'm just going to put a little headset on and watch a little video or watch a little one-off experience. It's a collaborative, I'm going with my mates, there's 4 of us, we're going to go and kick the shit out of Vader. There's there's purpose to that. And it's very, very different. And I know that in Los Angeles, the IMAX experience, they were doing John Wick, and you could go and shoot a gun and look around corners and all sorts of wonderful things. But it is very much, taking it to the next level when you've got physical props that you're interacting with within a VR environment as well.
So I think that's when we start to stray into mixed reality or hybrid reality. I would say that The Void is, it is actually the video that I use whenever I'm explaining to a new client the difference between AR, VR, and MR. I use The Void as a great example of mixed reality, because people can watch that video and go, wow, okay, I can see where this is all going.
But Curtis, I need to know the answer to this question, okay? As somebody who is teaching students about VR and gaming, do you use MR or XR? Come on. This is an important question.
That's a really important one.
Are you pro Microsoft or not?
we haven't used it. We've only used the Oculus Rift so far.
Okay.
So yeah, we've only been Oculus so far, and that's purely because of the startup situation. And I think we are looking for it. But with these things kind of coming out, we've already held back on the Vive because the Vive Pro is coming out.
Yeah.
So we're just sort of like holding back a year to see what else comes out next, because I feel like the Microsoft.
The problem is you're always going to be in that cycle.
Yeah.
It's like the longer you wait, you'll just be waiting for infinity because something's always coming out. In fact, it kind of makes me chuckle. Over Christmas, I took the plunge. I got a Lenovo.
Okay. I haven't tried that one. Is that?
I regret it already.
Oh, okay.
Because the minute I got one, no, not because it's a bad experience. Lenovo, I love you. You're amazing. I do. But the minute I got it, they advertised a new thing that was coming out, and I'm just like, I hate you. Don't make me do this again.
So I'm led to believe the best mixed reality headset is the Samsung headset. However, you can't buy that in the EU yet.
No.
I'm told there's ways and means you can get it, but probably not legally. So we've not tried that, but I'm told by the people that have that is the flagship for mixed reality.
I think the interesting thing with that though is that because the technology keeps on evolving, because there's something new always coming down the pipeline, it makes it incredibly difficult to stay ahead of the curve, especially when you're teaching and you're trying to keep those students kind of on point with whatever is new and accessible at the time. And gosh, I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it must be to always be teaching them about the new thing that's emerging, especially when there's still so much that we're trying to, as the industry's trying to figure it out and make sure that we're doing it the right way. And then you're kind of teaching your students, pushing them out into the open and saying, go for it.
That's it. It's whatever came out in the last sort of year.
Yeah.
You kind of feel it's going to stick around. And I can teach this now.
Is that your kind of cut-off point? 12 months. If it's out in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of that spectrum of kind of location-based and destination, let's call it destination VR. I am kind of curious where you see the kind of skill sets that are emerging that are going to need to be applied to this, because it's one thing to develop content for VR and have somebody working in a game studio. It's quite another to understand the logistics of what is essentially a retail destination or a theme park destination, if you like, and understanding like the dynamics of footfall or the dynamics of, body heat and all these other little quirky things that are very, very specific to a physical location.
Yeah, and it's really tough because a lot of the work that we do outside of Tameka, so you mentioned the top of the program that most VR companies also then have a dirty secret, which is our corporate work, which we have to do because it keeps us.
It's not dirty; it's practical.
No, absolutely. But of course, we would all love to be making games 100% of the time, but the industry's just not. Well, for us at least, it's not big enough to sustain a studio. So we work on corporate applications. Many of those applications go into the retail space, and the challenge that we continually have is on usability. So people typically don't know how to when they put the headset on, when it's blurred, what do they do? How do they don't really
Basic
know. Where's
stuff.
the button that makes it clear? Well, you have to wiggle it on your nose. That's about as technical as it gets. And then, they'll press if it's a Gear VR, for example, they'll press the touchpad and something will happen, it'll take them back.
Accidentally go out of it.
Yeah, you cannot see what they can see, so it's really tough to guide them through.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're rolling this out to thousands of people across dozens of stores, you can't be there. So you have to, we employ what we call brand ambassadors that are, they're typically students that are doing part-time work, right, to pay for their studies. And they're not necessarily the most technical people or most patient of people. And so that whole delivery of the experience in those destinations is a real challenge. And the problem that we find is that most people trying VR today are trying it for the first time. Probably not people listening to this because they're likely to be technically very savvy, but most people trying VR are trying it for the first time. And so there's a great responsibility, I feel like Spider-Man, there's a great responsibility here for content creators to deliver a piece of content that doesn't make people feel sick. Because the challenge is when someone watches a really bad experience because it's been developed poorly, the person viewing that doesn't say that's a really bad experience. What they say is that's really bad technology.
Well, this is the thing that I say a lot at conferences and events, which is, again, not to get too Spider-Man-y about it, but,
with great power.
With great power comes great responsibility. But no, we do as an industry have a burden of responsibility to ensure that actually we are making experiences the best they can possibly be, but that needs to be platform agnostic, because most of the general mainstream consuming public don't understand the difference between different types of VR. Right. So if they have a shitty cardboard experience, as far as they're concerned, VR is shite, and they will tell everybody it's terrible.
Yeah. And
then if you put them into a tethered headset, they'll be like, oh my God, what is this? It's something completely different. It's like, well, you already told everybody VR was bad.
Yeah.
So, and they oftentimes they won't even give it another chance, because once they have perceived to have had a bad experience in any form of VR, they just assume that sweeps across everything. But it's like, well, okay, if I was going to say I watched a movie on a mobile, smartphone screen, and it was shite because it was really small, that doesn't mean that it's going to look bad on a TV or on a cinema screen or on a tablet screen. It's just I picked a particularly bad screen in the first place to watch it on.
Yeah.
But the mainstream consuming public, don't understand that there is that spectrum of technology available to them.
That's exactly right. And if we go back to early days of VR, when the VR developer community was pretty small, and we discussed this outside, right? The community was all supportive of one another, because we understood that we all had to be successful.
Yep.
We couldn't have one person putting out a really bad experience that would then taint lots of people's view of the industry. And whilst we're absolutely supportive of people trying and developing for VR, of course we are. There's this real danger right now that the guy in his bedroom, and I'm not saying that all guys in their bedroom are bad developers. Well, I use guys as an American guys. It's girls and boys. But there's. I'll give you a really good example. I'm a little bit careful not to upset anyone, but I went to my local Tesco's about 3 weeks ago, and there was a cat food VR experience. And the experience put you in the shoes of a cat.
Oh, why?
And so you look down, you've got your little cat.
Does it make people buy cat food?
Well, it's raising. It's just another neat marketing channel, I guess. But
for animal lovers.
But the challenge. So you know VR, right? You know VR. You put someone in a headset. You look down. You've got cat feet. Yeah. You then run under the table, jump up on the kitchen top, jump back down, jump on the lap of someone. You feel sick already, right? and so whilst we're really, of course we're really happy that these brands are investing in VR experiences. Of course we are, but they have to realise that people watching that are then going to be taking that off, going, "Whoa, okay, that makes me feel sick. All VR makes me feel sick."
I'm not going to buy my cat food.
And I'm not going to buy the cat food.
Here's the thing: is that it's interesting though, because again, this is one of those statements I make all the time at conferences. Is there's no such thing as motion sickness in VR. There's only bad developers. That might sound really harsh.
I'm going to speak on behalf of the developers here. So actually, there's a number of different things that contribute to sim sickness. Yes. One of them is the user themselves. So if you've had a heavy night on the beer,
if you're more susceptible to motion sickness, there's nothing anybody in the world is going to be able to do about that.
Exactly.
But as a developer, you can be cognizant of the issues that exist, and you can plan around it. And oftentimes when we see bad VR that's making people really violently motion sick, it's because the actual development is bad.
Yeah.
And they haven't thought about it. And, like, for example, with the cat bouncing around the place, it's like, did we really need to throw the audience back quite that much? I don't know if that was necessary exactly. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but I do feel that there are too many developers who are rushing into making experiences and not really considering, actually, is this a good experience? Should I be making this experience? And it's kind of like back in the day with mobile, when everybody wanted a mobile app, or they wanted mobile, first website, or whatever the thing was. And instead of asking the logical question, which should have been why, people were just, let's do it. And then you ended up with all these mobile games, which was basically a free runner game that had been branded with whatever over the top for no good reason. And I kind of feel a little bit like with VR, we're getting a certain segment of the industry that's kind of doing that as well. But I do think that there is perhaps not enough understanding of the risks inherent with bad VR experiences and bad development processes. And some of that obviously comes through, I'm looking at Curtis, he's just like, don't you do it, don't you do it. But it does, it comes from the training, it comes from the awareness that they're being taught when they are, in these kind of games development courses such as yours. So
and those bad experiences help us more than even the good experiences do, because then we can look at those, we can say, look at this, this VR experience that's just there to try and sell cat food in a funny way, and learn from it, and like the .com boom and everything like that, we've got loads of websites that we can look at. Like, don't ever design things like that. Don't ever do.
I've got visions of Fresher Week where you're putting students in a VR headset and have a bucket net nearby.
Well, Thresher's Week would absolutely be terrible anyway, even if you had a really great VR experience. Taking people that have been on the alcohol for most of the week is going to be...
That's like asking for it.
It's not good.
Okay, so I'm kind of... Again, I'm keep on steering it back to this location-based piece, because I feel like this is the missing link at the moment for a lot of people who are spending a lot of time and energy in creating VR content and VR games, is this notion of, okay, where are people actually going to experience these things?
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, the large proportion of them, unless they're a hardcore gamer or an early adopter, it's not going to be in the home.
Yeah,
it's going to be, whether it's at a conference or, a festival or something like that, games festival, whatever the thing is, or it's going to be in a location-based entertainment arcade of some sort. And so on that basis, I'm kind of curious, because one of the things I note from a lot of VR arcade owners is they find it incredibly difficult to actually make contact with the developers, with the studios, to say, we'd like a commercial license for this title.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of confusion about, well, how's this supposed to work? Because if the game isn't on Steam, then how do I do this? Because Steam has a commercial license, but PSVR, what do I do? Just buy PSVR and stick it in my thing? Or, what's the thing? And so I think there are a lot of people who are quite confused, and there are a lot of questions bandying around. And from your perspectives, and I say this to both of you, what do you see being the kind of the path forward in connecting those communities together? Because unless developers are speaking to these VR arcade owners, these location owners, there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect going forwards.
Yeah, and it is a challenge. We are on Steam, so I don't know what it's called any longer. Is it Cyber Cafe, I think, is the program? Yeah, and so we typically will we get, I don't know, 5-ish inquiries a week from various VR arcade, VR cafe owners, and so we physically couldn't generate a contract for each one of those. It would be it'd be a real challenge for us to manage that. So we do just steer people down the Steam route. I guess I don't know. My expectation, if you're starting a VR arcade, is that you would probably be aware of at least Steam existing. You don't think that's the case?
Honestly, I have come across some. No offense to any of the VR arcade owners who are listening, because I know that there's a whole bunch of you that listen to the show, but no offense. I have come across some people who literally, they come from a retail background or, a shopping background or whatever the thing is. And they're just like, oh, VR is this cool thing. Let's jump on the bandwagon. And they have no clue. I remember maybe 6 months ago, there was this whole string of people that kept on emerging asking the same questions, which is really basic, but you're kind of sitting there going, wow, seriously, you don't. Me. And the basic question was, how do I start the system when I have 6 or 10 headsets? How do I start it remotely? And you're just you do realise there is software for arcades that actually manages the systems. I'm like, do I need to have one person standing next to each headset? And you're just like, what?
Right, wow, okay.
So I wouldn't make any assumptions at this stage. There are a lot of people who are coming into it
I'm very shocked. Okay.
Don't
wow. Okay. I stand corrected. In which case, that is a question I've not answered myself, because I didn't realise it was a challenge. So that's something I've learned today. How do we reach out to them?
How do we make it known that there is a process, or that there's a preferred way of going about this? And one of the other questions that I hear a lot from the VR arcade owners as well is there's games that they can get on Steam, or they can get on a PSVR or whatever. How does having the game in their arcade make it different or special? Because they're like, well, I need this to be something that they can't get at home. And that's an interesting question.
That's where we're going to be butting heads with them, because you know, Radial G was a very one of the first games launched for this kind of latest on vogue set of headsets, and you know, we're not in a position where we've made the money back that we've spent on development. I rather suspect there are not many VR games out there that have made their investment back. But so,
is it a content strategy though, that you say, okay, this is our standard game, the standard content of the game, but here is special content specifically for VR arcading, and therefore at a different price point?
Yes, but how many VR arcades can afford? So I'm having actually this conversation right now with a company in the Netherlands who want a special version of Radial G, and we've said, you know, minimum spend. You know, if you want a new track, you want a new ship, new menu, even. You know, it's not cheap for us to do that, and often they're not able to therefore afford it. You know, we're talking even to add like a new track into Radial G, somewhere around £30,000 ish. I don't know.
But could this be a strategy that we collaboratively get a bunch of arcades together and say, okay, you as the arcade industry want this, you put the money together and pay us, and we'll do a separate thing just for you. I mean, maybe that's a strategy and approach that is worth considering. I mean, Curtis, what's your thoughts on this?
I think it's really interesting, and it's something that obviously as an educational institute we're interested in getting involved with, because we can sort of start to discuss having small projects, and we have done, and we are currently discussing. For us, this kind of takes a form of escape rooms. So escape rooms are sort of contacting us and talking about the possibilities of small, really small, like we're talking like 2-3 minute experiences. But again, it is something that, you're right, arcades have to get a really good scope on how hard this is and how large a project these can be. If they're asking for huge changes to a game, that can be a big thing. And to me, that arcades, they already have something, which is they have multiple headsets, they have multiple things, and therefore the VR experience can be shared, which is not available to anyone that I know at home.
But then that's the thing is a lot of these arcades aren't doing those collaborative experiences. They're literally just putting somebody in a singular experience in a single headset in an arcade. It's like, why can't I just go home and do that? And worry less about falling down in front of other people? you know.
Yeah, it's very true. I guess if I think back to kind of traditional arcades, that they were. I'm going back to Operation Wolf, so you can tell how old I am now. But you couldn't get back then anyway. You couldn't get Operation Wolf on at home, and so it was went out to shoot the it's a very interesting.
I would always have fun at an arcade with friends.
Yeah,
like you would play.
It's about the collaborative experience, and yet there are still people who are touting insular experiences within our arcades, which is kind of questionable as to their understanding of what VR arcade actually is in some ways. And in some ways, actually, escape rooms is a really good example, because a lot of the people who build escape rooms don't actually have a game design background. They are just enthusiasts. They're people who like putting puzzles together, but they don't actually design games.
That's a really good point, because actually we talk to escape rooms, and very often what they'll do is they'll buy a location and buy the game design of they'll license it off someone. They don't do that design themselves, and so actually what you're suggesting is we have a VR equivalent of that, almost like an industry body that licenses destination based VR, not. So actually, something like Radial G, even if it had a new map, it's not actually that compelling.
But if you had a catalogue of titles like that, that makes it an interesting proposition from a VR arcade perspective.
Yeah.
So basically, ladies and gentlemen, we've just come up with a new revenue model for VR arcading.
There you go.
Okay. But as always, we like to ask the big question. And in this context, I am kind of curious as to what do you think needs to be that single big change, be that a cultural shift or a technological shift that is going to be able to push people out of their homes and into VR arcades or location-based entertainment arcades that are doing immersive entertainment experiences. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on this, and Curtis, I'm gonna ask you first.
He went straight to me. Oh no, skip it. Let me think of that one.
Mark, you go first and we'll come back to Curtis.
I think we've probably arrived at the answer through today's conversation, which is, creating variety of experiences that don't match those that you can get yourself at home. For the last, what you cannot do with VR is show people a YouTube video and say, there you go, that's what VR is all about. Look at this video, isn't it great? You have to put people in the headset. And when you do, we take some of our stuff that doesn't really appeal to us anymore because it's kind of old technology. It was a bit boring. It's non-interactive, and we put that in people's heads, and they go, "Wow!" And we still have to remind ourselves that most people don't and not seen this stuff. So we had a great responsibility. Spider-Man again at the start of the VR wave. Getting out, and we went to literally every games show that we could, and we put VR headset on as many people as we could, which wasn't very good. We went to the League of Legends because everyone had blue hair and it mucked up a bunch of Oculus Rift. But anyway, but that's what that's what is going to make the industry take off, is getting headsets onto people's heads, and for that, you need to make that entry barrier very low. So, no high costs. I've got to say the hardware vendors themselves have got to do a better job here. We've been out essentially helping to sell their technology now for years, as have all of the other indie developers that started this, because no AAA guys were doing VR software back when we were. It was left to the indie developers. And now the AAAs have started to get involved. Us indie developers are kind of being waved off and forgotten. And it feels a little bit, and actually, if you look at the real innovation, where real innovation comes from, if you want FIFA 16, 17, 18, Grand Theft Auto, great games, by the way, but Grand Theft Auto 3, 4, 5, 6, if you want to look outside of that and look for real innovation in VR, then you've got to empower the indies. You've got to help the indies out.
I find this interesting because, and it's a thing that we hear a lot, when people talk about what the issues that are a challenge to the industry at the moment, and this idea of you need to put people in a headset in order for them to truly understand VR. And there is kind of a counter argument to suggest that actually, for the mainstream consuming public, the majority of the public don't actually want to put a headset on their head. They see it as this scary tech thing that only tech geeks and gamers are going to put on their head. And there's this kind of distance between mainstream people, I'm using the inverted commas here, mainstream people and gamers as such who would do this. And actually, if you look at YouTube and you put in, you type into the YouTube search 360 videos or VR videos, you're not actually going to find a VR video that you can drop it into a cardboard or drop it into a headset and see it. What you'll see is somebody else experiencing VR, a 2D video, watching that person experiencing the VR. 9 times out of 10, where it's a horror thing and they rip the headset off screaming and hurl it away from them, or fall over because they're trying to lean against a table that isn't there, or whatever the funny thing is. And that's actually what people are watching, is they're watching other people experience VR rather than experiencing it themselves. And if anything, there's an argument to say that the behaviors of eSports are what's prevalent in VR right now, rather than people actually playing the game themselves. And so there's this obsession, this focus on getting consumers into headsets, whereas actually there's an argument to suggest we should be focusing on the audiences that want to watch other people play.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, well, we call it red-faced syndrome. People, a number of times we've seen that people just will not put, they've just bluntly refused to put on the headset because they're slightly embarrassed as to when they it's like closing your eyes in a room and people around you can still see you. And it's that oh god, what are they thinking about what I'm doing here? And so one of the big things that is coming along, and it doesn't really fit with your kind of question as to how do we get more people out to destination-based and out-of-home experiences, but it's something I think will radically help the industry, and that is set-top boxes. So Apple TV, and we're talking to a number of set-top box manufacturers at the moment about beaming 360 video to your TV. Now, you say, how on earth can you do that? But that's where you use your magic remote control or your phone to control the orientation of the camera. And I think that's like the first step in just getting people, because probably everyone here, right, is the first VR experience you had, VR in inverted commas, was 360 video. Right? It's where everyone gets them. And so actually to engage the masses, we've got to take them through that step, and we've got to give them a 360 video first, that doesn't mean they're going to feel embarrassed about putting on the headset. So actually putting it into their TV and allowing people to control the TV direction orientation with your...
This is why the Facebook...
That kind of falls back to an argument you had earlier on, whereas we're giving people the first experience of VR, which isn't that immersive. And therefore we're kind of falling back on the... I've had
Nobody can see the faces that Curtis is pulling right now.
I've had so many people come in and like, especially older staff and things like that, and they said, "Oh, I've tried VR before," and things like that. And they're talking about their mobile, mobile phone,
like a Facebook 360 video or YouTube,
something like that. And then we eventually get them into an Oculus or whatever else it is, a higher end piece, and they're amazed. They're like, "I didn't know this was VR." So there is a struggle there. There is still a struggle. You're right.
But is that necessarily a bad thing, though? Is the question. So, for example, in the same way that people, I used the example before of watching a movie on your smartphone versus watching it at a cinema or watching it on your TV, there is a different expectation of what the device and the platform will do for you. Is it necessarily a bad thing that 360 video is on the kind of the entry level drug phase, before we get them addicted to proper hardcore VR? Is it necessarily a bad thing to be a gateway drug?
I think it's the difficulty with making sure that people are clear about what VR is, and like we were discussing earlier, okay, we're just calling everything VR. Like most people are calling everything VR at the moment, whether or not that is a mobile platform or a higher end platform. And you're right, it could be the gateway, but do they know it's the gateway? And it's that kind of education
clarity.
That is going to get better if you are okay with immersing yourself and shutting your eyes with people watching you and things like that.
So the new phrase is, it gets better.
It gets better. VR, it gets better.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If you look back at the last big technology advance when tablets came out, and I remember being one of those people that just didn't get tablets. What is the point? It's just a big smartphone. I didn't understand it. And now, of course, they're on the desk, they're coffee tables of almost everyone in the land, and it's a piece of essential equipment that everyone has, including myself. So, and I don't know, maybe VR just has to. There's a lot of hype around this, and of course, with the players behind VR, you can, there's a lot of money there, and you can understand why the hype exists. But I think they're trying to force it when it probably needs to come more organically.
And I also think it's not a standalone VR future as well. I think that there needs to be some acknowledgement that there's going to be, mixed reality or XR, or, whether it's going to be using haptics or, AI or cryptocurrency and blockchain, whatever the thing is, there's going to be a multitude of many different technologies. But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you. We ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. What would that be, Curtis?
I'm not a massive, being a teacher, I'm not a massive social media choice, but you can find me on Instagram at Curty31.
Curty31. Liking that. And the Elam handle is?
Elam handle is...
Should we come back to you instead? Okay. So you can reach us at our corporate VR company. It's called Austella, which is AUSTELLA. So if you on Twitter for @AustellaVR, or one word, then you'll find us.
Wonderful, thank you, Mark.
And our Elam handle is ElamHQ, so ELAMHQ.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk. DigitalJamSessions.com